When I was 6, about 28 years ago, my mom and dad took me and my younger sister to an MLB game, leaving my grandmother to babysit my younger sister. When we got back, my grandmother told my folks that two guys that came by the house with photography equipment and asked whether a young girl with red curly hair lived there, and that they had spotted her and that she would be a great child model for some advertising work they were doing. When my grandmother said she wasn't home, they said they would come back another time. My grandmother and mom didn't think much about it, but my dad said something's not right here and called the police. 15 minutes later, several FBI agents showed up and began conducting interviews with my grandmother and my parents while I ran around and showed the agents my Matchbox police helicopter. Turns out, we had been targeted by a child theft ring, and the photographers would take a bunch of photos and wait until the toddler threw a tantrum, and the photographers would then ask the mother to go grab a toy to keep the child entertained. While the mother was out of the room, they would grab the child and bolt, leaving everything else behind. The FBI told my folks that my sister had already been sold and would have been out of the country within 24 hours if they got her. We were advised to change preschools and other aspects of our daily routine. It still gives me the chills to think about what could have happened to her. Needless to say, my mom became pretty overprotective. It was a few years before she even trusted us with a babysitter. Okay, so when my mom was a youngin', her and her mother lived in a trailer in the backyard of a family member's house. My mom was about 12 at the time that the man in the neighboring house started to stare at her from time to time. She got a creepy vibe from him, but figured it was just a harmless, lonely guy. One night, though, when my mom was alone, she had heard something on the roof of their trailer. Then she heard what sounded like footsteps slowly walking along the metal rooftop. Given that they were dirt poor at the time, they didn't have a phone, so she eventually ran out of the trailer and into the house without looking on the roof. When her uncle went outside to investigate, nothing was on the roof. A few weeks went by with no incidents, and my mom figured she must have been overly scared of nothing. More fucked up stuff would randomly happen, but only when she was alone, and it was only spaced out a week or two. If I remember correctly, this occurred over maybe a couple months before it stopped completely. Months go by without any weird instances at all, until one night, my mom wakes up to the trailer unbelievably hot. She could feel the heater on full blast. She got out of bed and was about to go to the control for the trailer's heater, but she was overcome with a bad feeling and decided to just go into the house. The uncle went out to the trailer and noticed that the lock on the door was broken or messed with, and he looked inside quickly but didn't see anything. His wife made him call the police, and when they came out, they searched the trailer and found one of the kitchen knives behind a chair next to the heating controller. They suspected that the neighbor went into the trailer, turned the heat up, and crouched behind the chair waiting for my mom to come by, and then, who knows. It's been a long time since I heard this story, but from what I remember, the cops questioned the neighbor but really couldn't do anything about it. Luckily, my mom and grandmother were able to move out of the town right after that. My mom told me that about 5 or something years later, she was visiting other family who lived in a nearby town, and she saw the neighbor at a grocery store, and she bolted out before he saw her. Just a few months ago, while I was still in school, I rented an old house with two of my friends. I lived in the basement, and they each had a room upstairs. Several strange things happened to me while I was living in that basement. The first was that I had just gotten a dog and he was about 4 months old at the time. Now then, right when I turned off the TV to go to sleep, my dog would start whining and growling at one corner of the room. He would usually not get on my bed because he wasn't allowed, but during these times he would jump on my bed and get as close to me as he could, all without his eyes ever leaving that corner. This happened about 5 times over the course of 4 months. Then, toward the end of the school year, when I was about to move out, the scariest thing that has ever happened to me in my life occurred. Under our stairs was a little door that led to a small space that had a dirt floor. There was also a really weird old wooden piece of what looks like a map nailed to the inside of the door, so it's a pretty spooky place. Up until the day before this incident, We had kept a small chair in front of this door that I laid my coats and things on, but we had some friends over the night before, so we brought the chair upstairs. It was dark, probably around 8 p.m., and I had just been upstairs in the kitchen. I'd just gotten off the stairs and was about to open the door to my room, when the door to the little closet under the stairs opened so slowly with the loudest creak I've ever heard in my life. I stood rooted to the spot, frozen in fear, staying at the closet, waiting for whatever was about to come out of it. I literally stood there for about 5 minutes, absolutely terrified. Eventually, I opened the door to my room and locked it as fast as I could. I wasn't sure either my roommates were home, so I called my female roommate and she was there. I spent the rest of the night upstairs with her, still too scared to go back downstairs. I should mention that I'm a 21-year-old man who does not scare easily. Now, I know many of you will probably say it was the wind, or the fact that I had just come down the stairs, or something that maybe my roommates did. But I've had those things happen to me before and been kind of creeped out, but this was different. The second I heard that closet open and looked over to see it opening so slowly, I felt this sheer terror. I honestly felt like there was someone or something else in that room with me that wanted me to see that door open. So about 2 years ago, I was in my room reading a book when I hear it, soft as ever, two little girls giggling. And not just any giggle, it was the kind of giggling you hear in horror movies. I immediately put down my book and listened. After about a minute of holding my breath, I decided it must have come from outside. Then that night, just as I'm about to drift off to sleep, I hear it again. Two little girls giggling. Now it was 2 a.m. and I was pretty damn sure there weren't two little girls outside my window at that time of night. So I began to freak out. I sat up in my bed and waiting for what felt like forever, was just listening. And then I hear it again. I jumped out of my bed and gonna spend the rest of my night in the guest room. By the next morning, I was convinced my room was haunted. For the next week, I avoided my room and spent my nights in the guest room, unbeknownst to my family. I was afraid to tell anyone for fear I was going crazy or they wouldn't believe me. But every time I spent more than an hour in my room, I could hear those two little girls giggle. By the end of the week, I was a mess. I could barely sleep and was terrified of my room. Then one morning, my brother walks up to me and says, "You deaf or something?" Obviously, I was confused, and after further questioning, he tells me about the small device he had placed in my room. Apparently, it's like some sort of prank device that's easily hidden. It can make a variety of different noises. My brother, however, chose the creepiest fuck little girl's giggling sound. He wondered why I hadn't heard it or said anything about it all week. I just wanted to punch him in the face. So, it turned out, my room wasn't haunted after all. Moral of the story, sometimes your brother is just an asshole. Oh man, junior year of college. Now my proudest moment. Me and maybe half a dozen friends are hanging out on a Saturday night and we're just crispy baked. Basically the second the last bowl was finished, it happened. Knock at the door. Serious knocking. Panic knocking. What do? Cops? Gotta be cops. We are so fucked. I'm getting kicked out of housing this time. One of the girls goes to answer the door. A guy with insane Ted Kaczynski hair and no pants is screaming at the door to let him in. The girl screams and tries to shut the door, but the guy's just forcing his way in. He's bleeding pretty bad and is basically draped over my friend in a heap. He's totally incoherent and just keeps yelling please and making no sense otherwise. My friend runs down to help the girl. I could muster precisely zero courage. I was scared to death. Terrified, I stood at the top of the stairs like a housewife that seen a mouse in an old cartoon. What do we do? What do we do? Oh god, what do we do? You have to call the police, right? I can't do it, I'm freaking out, man. I don't know what to do with my hands. Someone calls and tells the police an old, possibly homeless man is trying to force his way into the apartment. My terrified, super big mind could only reason that a homeless guy was breaking into our place. Someone calls the police and I remain totally panicking at the top of the steps, helping in no way whatsoever. My friend has wrestled the guy out of the apartment and is trying to calm him down. I made sure the top of the steps was secure. Eventually the cops came and they took the disheveled, pantless, homeless man away in an ambulance. We close the door and sit back down in the living room. Is anyone else not baked at all anymore? Someone asked. We were not. Frazzled, we decided we'd smoke some more and try to relax. We'd go over the series of events 100 times over the few weeks. I tried to downplay my role as a guardian of the stairwell. Like a week later, we find out it was neither an old nor homeless guy, but rather a friend of a friend on a really bad acid trip who had lost his pants and ran through a field in a panic. I supervised the night crew from 4 to midnight at a subway. The day crew has never mentioned it, but the night crew always makes jokes about our sub ghost, although I've stopped being sure that it's actually a joke. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that the subway I work at is haunted, but I'm not saying it's not haunted either. It's open 24/7, so past midnight just one person stays by themselves until day crew rolls in around about 6 a.m. And I always spend at least half an hour at night alone, and quite a while with just one other person. Sometimes we hear voices. The music is off, so there's only one or two of us, but you can hear people having a conversation. Although it's too quiet to pick out words. The first time I heard voices, I looked at my supervisor and asked if she's hearing them too. And she looks at me in the eyes and casually says, "Yeah, it's the sub ghost talking." It sounds like a joke, but I realize when I'm training a newbie on the late shift, given the casual, "It's just a sub ghost" response more times than I can remember. There's voices, there's weird crashing noises. Sometimes when no one's in the room, things fall off the counters for no discernible reason. Once, our owner bought new paper towel auto dispensers to replace the old push dispensers. I was alone right before the graveyard guy came in when I heard a towel dispense. I walked around the corner and everything was quiet. I was about to walk away when another towel came out. Then another, and then another. Finally, it goes full sub-ghost and dispenses the entire roll continuously without stopping, much like when a cat finds out how to unroll your toilet paper. It only stopped when there was no paper left. No one was around, but a few days later the owner switched them back, so now we have a manual paper towel thingies back. If there is a sub-ghost, she or he is a homie. I don't really mind. Stupid day crew is oblivious, but us night crew tend to become quite familiar with the sandwich spook, and its presence is so constant. It's a strange night when something isn't explained by that sub-ghost, that the voices have almost become comforting. The creepiest thing I've ever remember happening to me didn't involve paranormal things. I was walking to the store late at night, probably around 11 to 1 a.m. Don't remember, but the streets were isolated. I live in the Bronx, in a not-so-safe area, but I've grown up around the not-so-nice people in the neighborhood all my life, to not be afraid that anything will happen to me, since a lot of them actually look out for their neighbors. They still aren't nice people to others, but I digress. While I was walking the streets, they were completely empty until I heard footsteps behind me. Being the cautious person that I am, I turned around to take a good look at the man for a long minute, just in case I had to identify him later. Growing up in unsafe places typically my line of thinking. Being that I'm a short girl, and this man was twice my height, I was a bit creeped out, but kept walking like normal. After a while, he caught up to me and asked if I was Dominican, and I sternly said yes, and kept walking. He then asked if I was 18. This was 3 years ago, and at the time I was 17, and I replied no, and was ready to cross the street because he was freaking me out. As soon as I said no, he looked at me disappointed and said, "Oh, never mind," then ran away from me. It was such a small thing, but it really creeped me out thinking about what may have happened if I told him I was 18, and what exactly this guy was planning. Kidnapping attempt in the 1980s. Sacramento neighborhood late at night, visiting a friend when I was maybe 9 to 10 years old. 3 of us walk out to go play at this park/elementary school several blocks away at around 10 p.m. at night. We were playing frisbee in the street in front of the school, and our frisbee lands in the street as a white van pulls up and stops, as if to allow us to get our frisbee. I walked toward the van and grabbed the frisbee. then moved to the side to allow the van to pass. As the van passed, the sliding door opened, and a guy dressed in black like ninja came flying out and tried to grab me. He had a harness on, and the van had been rigged with a telescoping mechanism that allowed him to come out around 5 feet while hanging from this harness, like they do in some haunted houses where people appear to be flying. It was operated by another person inside, also dressed in black, so there was at least 3 people involved in this attempt. I barely dodged his attempt to grab me, and all 3 of us ran towards the elementary school and hopped the fence, about 6 feet tall, ran along the fence through the bushes, and then hopped the second fence, about 15 inches maybe, that allowed us to be inside the school. We were scared as hell and could hear the van driving around and soon they were in hot pursuit. We found a way to get onto the roof of the school from the inside, thank God, and proceeded to observe the van driving around the school for at least 30 minutes in an obvious attempt to find us. This scared us even more because one would think the would-be kidnappers would flee, and I suppose they thought we could identify them. This was before cell phones, so we stayed up there until around 45 minutes after we last saw them. It appeared that some of them were searching for us on foot also, which added to my fear. We eventually escaped and went back to my friend's house, and never told anyone in our family out of fear of being punished.
In this little shop of horrors, that's how we get down. Yeah, enter the projects on the prairie, scary. Greet you at the gate with Bloody Marys. Blood, a rail full of blood. Back to the cemetery, get more blood. Standing on the grave, drinking blood, smoking bones. We seen a crew of ghouls running by with stolen tombstones. With Hell's Angels on the chase, they lost the bus of black skull. Want you embrace, they tie you up in chains and they stomp on your face. They go to purgatory and they beat the fucking case. I look around, man.